You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. As the recruiting world turns, like sand through the hourglass of time, these are the days of our lives. Yes, the recruiting soap opera continues. We have talked a good bit, and will continue to talk a good bit, about Bryce Underwood until the early signing period begins, and Bryce Underwood signs with LSU on December the 4th, as we all anticipate that he will. Let me begin. There was an update in the whole Bryce Underwood, Michigan saga as that's developing. I'll just very quickly give you the update, and then I'll circle back to why all of this is relevant and what you need to know and all that good stuff. So Carter Smith, who is, if you don't know Bryce Underwood, LSU commit, #1 quarterback in the country from Michigan. Michigan has ramped up the recruitment lately. Carter Smith, who has been committed to Michigan, 4-star quarterback from the state of Florida, decommitted on Wednesday night from the University of Michigan. Thank the coaching staff. Coach Campbell, the assistant there, who had been recruiting him, and announced he's decommitting from Michigan. Naturally, everyone who is thinking that Bryce Underwood is going to flip from LSU to Michigan, the in-state school, sees this as a sign that, well, Underwood's flipping, and so Carter Smith is leaving the class. All right. I want to give you some perspective and an opinion on the matter, and we'll move through this. So let me first begin, and I'm going to go ahead and assume that most of you know who Bryce Underwood is by now, just by nature of the fact that this is a sports show, and if you're here, you care deeply enough to know something like that. But for the 1% of you who don't, let me just very quickly remind you, Bryce Underwood is not only the #1 quarterback, but the #1 overall player in the country for the class of 2025. That means he's a high school senior right now. He is going to sign in December and then be on a college campus this coming January to go through spring football. Not only is Bryce Underwood the #1 quarterback and the #1 player in the country, he is seen by recruiting services as a generational talent, right? His rating, not his ranking, where he's ranked #1, he's a 5-star. His rating is on par with the best recruits LSU's ever signed. Derek Stingley, Leonard Fournette, he's that type of player, right? Ryan Clark coached him in 7-on-7 down in Orlando earlier this year, and came on and said he's as good as anybody he's ever seen at this age, better than Trevor Lawrence at this age, better than C.J. Stroud at this age, meaning as a high school senior. So there's a lot of reasons why people are all in. Fast forward, Bryce Underwood's been committed to LSU since January, so it's been almost a year that Underwood's been committed to LSU. He has been firm, hasn't been taking other visits. He's been one of the Pied Pipers of this recruiting class, recruiting for LSU in this class. And interestingly enough, Shea Dixon told us earlier this week, Shea from On 3 the Bengal Tiger, that Bryce Underwood he plays football 18 miles from the Big House in Ann Arbor. His high school games are 18 miles from the Big House. He has not visited Michigan since July of 2023. So it's been more than a year. So all of these things point to Bryce Underwood is going to LSU, it's firm. Well, you look at what's happening at Michigan right now, and they're not exactly having the best season following up a national championship. And a lot of that, very obviously, is, well, you had 15 guys drafted, and your head coach is now the head coach of the Chargers, and your defensive coordinator, who is clearly awesome, is now the defensive coordinator of the Chargers. He's got them as the #1 scoring defense in the NFL in very short order. So for Sharon Moore, it's been a bit of a tumultuous year one, as you might understand. And so you could probably also understand that he's feeling a lot of pressure to make sure they nail this class. And when there's a 5-star transcendent #1 quarterback in the country who's 18 miles from your campus and he's committed to LSU, a lot of people around Michigan are probably throwing their hands in the air going, what? So, of late, Michigan has dramatically ramped up their recruitment of Bryce Underwood, trying to get him to flip from LSU. We've gone through this. So that's the quick Cliff's Notes to catch you up to where we are now. There was a report from On3, which we talked about earlier in the week, that Michigan is putting together a competitive NIL package that's in the neighborhood of $5 million over 3 to 4 years, which is on par with what others are offering. Now, I will tell you, As best that I have it, that LSU's NIL package for Bryce Underwood, while very competitive, is not that steep. It is not in that $5 million range over 3 to 4 years. But that's okay. And I'll explain why in a second. Bryce, by the way, at the time he committed to LSU, said, quote, "They offered me as a sophomore. They've been recruiting me since then, and the program history," why I picked LSU. They have great program history, great quarterback history as well. One of the things he's been very consistent on is the long-term view. It's not about getting the biggest NIL deal right now. It's about developing for the next level to get the big NIL or the big NFL money when you get to the league. And Michigan hasn't had great offenses and hasn't pumped first-round pick quarterbacks. I understand J.J. McCarthy a year ago, but look at Jaden Daniels. Look at this offense. Underwood has a great relationship with Joe Sloan. All of that to bring you to this point now where Carter Smith, who I don't know from Adam, if Carter Smith walked through that door right now and punched me in the face, I wouldn't know who he is. Might as well be John Smith or David Smith or anybody. Carter Smith decommitting from Michigan can be taken one of two ways. It can certainly be taken as he thinks Bryce Underwood's going to flip, and so he doesn't want to be part of a two-quarterback class with the number one quarterback in the country, so he's going to decommit and go somewhere else. I will say this, and I think this is an opinion for the flip side of this argument, which is you got 5 weeks until the early signing period. And one of the reasons I love the early signing period, and I've been consistent on this all along, it forces both the school and the athlete to show their hand. If you're not all in on, if you're the school and you're not all in on that player, you have to declare effectively. Because if you're not going to take their commitment, or if you're still recruiting somebody else, you're showing them what your intention is. And I think that's the case here. So let's play this hypothetical. You're Carter Smith. You're in the state of Florida. You've been committed to Michigan now. You pick Michigan over Florida, Penn State, Miami, and Cincinnati. Okay, so he committed in November. In November when Jim Harbaugh was still there. So he's been committed almost a year as well to Michigan. You've been committed almost a year. The coach you committed to is no longer there, and now 5 weeks before the early signing period, the school you're committed to and have been committed to for more than a year is ramping up their recruitment of another quarterback. What if they get him? Now you're in a two-quarterback class alongside the number one quarterback in the country? That doesn't sound too appealing. Well, if you're Carter Smith, you have a decision to make. Well, do I just stay firm with my commitment and see what happens? Well, if you do that, let's say you go all the way up to the early signing period and Bryce Underwood makes the decision to flip and it's December. Well, now what are you left with? Classes are full. Who needs a quarterback? Your options are limited. All that stuff. And at that point, when you're trying to enroll in January, now you're starting over. This at least gives him 5 weeks to say, what are my options? And maybe the option for Carter Smith is going to be Underwood stays at LSU, I recommit to Michigan, and that's where I land. Maybe that's the option. Or maybe Michigan is left in a lurch. Because what if Carter Smith finds a different school, Bryce Underwood stays with LSU, now you're Michigan, you got nothing. And you ain't good at quarterback right now either. And oh, by the way, there's another quarterback on the roster that's rumored to be hitting the portal as well. You'll find out about that soon enough. But I don't care about Michigan. The Underwood ties to LSU run deep, okay? And I'm going to be very clear. I have never had a single conversation with Bryce Underwood or any member of his family. All right, so I'm not giving you any firsthand information. What I do have, however, is very good relationships with professional relationships with members of the LSU coaching staff, with members of the LSU collective, with LSU boosters, with media that cover recruiting from the LSU perspective, guys like Shea, national media who cover recruiting as well. And everybody has their own story, right? Everybody has their own impression of what information they gather. So what I look for is, when do all of these different entities line up? Where are the consistencies in everyone's story? And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter who I talk to. National recruiting guy, local recruiting guy, collective guy, staff guy, anybody. Support staff out at LSU, whatever. Boosters, they all say the same thing. Bryce Underwood loves Joe Sloan. Loves Joe Sloan. Bryce Underwood wants to go to LSU. He wants to play in the SEC. He loves the culture at LSU. The Odell, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, the vibe around LSU, the hype video. He wants LSU. Wants to play in the SEC. Not so keen on the Michigan man thing, which is great for some, not great for everybody. All of that, and also that, yes, NIL is part of it, but he is making a football decision for the long tail. Where can I go that I'm going to play the best, get developed, and then ultimately be a first-round pick and go make 10, 20, 50x that NIL number in the NFL? And when everybody is saying that same thing, the only thing that I could think that would change that for Bryce Underwood is the Godfather offer. If Dave Portnoy or Michigan or somebody associated comes in and just dumps the pile of money that you just don't say no to, that could change it. Barring that, I think Bryce Underwood is still going to end up at LSU. And if Carter Smith doesn't end up back in Michigan's class, they're really going to be in a tough spot at quarterback. Because they're not good there now. Reports, ear to ground, word on the street is they're going to lose another quarterback that's currently on the roster. It's going to enter the portal. That's no surprise. A lot of teams do. And they're not going to get Bryce Underwood. Now, I don't care about Michigan. Whatever your lot in life is, if I see you in the playoff, I'll worry about you then. Otherwise, I don't really care what Michigan's doing. But I don't look at Carter Smith decommitting from Michigan as a sign that that's opening a spot for Bryce Underwood. I look at that as a young man going, the place I've been committed for a year, now 5 weeks before I'm ready to sign, is ramping up their recruitment of another guy at my position. They value him over me. Let me go see what my options are. And I think that's a heady play for that young guy to go find out what his options are so he's not left in a tough spot on signing day when all of a sudden the place he's been committed to forever and he's stopped taking visits and doesn't know what his options are. Now they got another quarterback. Now what do you do? So I think it's a smart move by Carter Smith to decommit from Michigan. And I don't think it means Bryce Underwood is going there. I will still say, unless if someone associated with Michigan comes in and dumps a giant pile of money on Bryce Underwood, that he will still end up an LSU Tiger, and I still believe that's what's going to happen. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.